Few things connect every human culture across time and location more than the void of space. That blackness that hangs over us constantly confronts us with the question, what is out there? From the earliest human civilizations who found constellations in the night sky, to writers of sci-fi space opera movies, to capitalists like Elon Musk who see a corporatized, monetized future out there, humans have looked up at the blackness of space and dreamed. But what is that dream? Is it a collective dream that we all share together? Or is that dream unique to each of us who dreams it? Bethesda director Todd Howard stated that Starfield was created to be the space game.
We'd often talk about and dream up the space game. What if we could take that feeling of being who you want to be and exploring a new world, but set it in space?
To him, the idea of the space game was so understood that he needed no further explanation to sell the game. But if that is true, it leads us to the next logical question. Whose universe, whose dream was Starfield creating for us to escape into? Soon after Starfield released, YouTuber Heels v Babyface stopped playing the game on stream after encountering the option to choose between pronouns, including they/them, in the game's character creator. He took this minor recognition of the existence of non-binary expression that he didn't even have to engage with not so well.
With all of that laid out in front of me, I love nothing more than to be dragged out at every conceivable opportunity so you can Faraday us. Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what? Pronouns! Gender ambiguity! Current day Californian because that's all we know! Because we're boring! We're so boring!
Mr. Babyface's main complaints were that this inclusion was evidence of Bethesda Western Game Company injecting modern-day politics, preventing him from escaping into his dream space adventure.
Immersion, having a good time, falling into a world and just getting lost. No, no, no! Currently!
Mr. Babyface's rant soon went viral, with the internet making fun of a 30-year-old man raging like a child over basic grammar, finally fulfilling the prophecy foretold by this meme.
We can't see past our own flexion. That's the level of our narcissism here at Bethesda Western Game Company.
His yells about immersion and escapism were framed by him as apolitical, when in reality, he was actually arguing for a profoundly political choice. What dream of space that he wished to be immersed into? One that did not question the way that he saw the world as it should be in any way. He was also arguing for a world where trans people could not be allowed to exist. He wanted the game to speak to his perspective alone, and any deviation from that he viewed as not only different from, but antagonistic to him. So, whose dream of space is Starfield's then, if not Surface of Babies? I could create my non-binary badass space hero that I always wanted to be, so maybe Starfield was supposed to be my dream of space. But as I began to play Starfield, I found its void emptier than I ever imagined space could be. Not just the endless barren moons filled with machine learning generated landscapes, but the very stories that I uncovered felt empty. I was not discovering something new, but seemed to be staring back at a reflection. It was not an adventure into the unknown, but the familiar. Hey there interwebs, I hope you're all doing well. Before we get to the meat of this video, I have a very special, very calm announcement to give. I made a freaking movie, everybody! Okay, technically I'm still making a movie right now, but we actually went and filmed it. Like, we did the whole production for my movie Identities, and now we are in post-production, and y'all, it was absolutely a dream. I am going to be telling more of this story in other videos down the road. I'm able to speak more publicly about it, because right now we're trying to keep the secrets for all of you, but it was absolutely an amazing experience where I got to work with such wonderful people like John Delancey, Abigail Thorne, Maggie Mayfish, and so many others, and it was so wonderful and so queer and trans. And you can kind of even hear it a little bit in my voice that I've lost my voice because I was yelling action so much on set this past week. It was absolutely amazing, and I can't wait for you all to see it. It's a science fiction queer trans film that is only going to be released on Nebula, which is a streaming service that helped fund the entire film. I cannot tell you how honored I am to have been supported and cared for by Nebula, and I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart, even beyond the fact that they helped fund my film. I truly think it is an amazing platform that you all should be supporting, and I think that you get some amazing stuff out of it as well. For those of you who don't know what it is, Nebula is a streaming service created by my fellow YouTube creators as a place for us to be able to put videos outside of the algorithm, as well as uplift and fund and create work that we couldn't put on YouTube, such as my film Identities. But even beyond Identities, if you like queer stuff, they have Abigail Thorne's The Prince play, which is a science fiction Shakespeare multiverse play, as well as Maggie Mayfish's Unrated, which is a series that talks about some forgotten and marginalized filmmakers that you all should be checking out. On top of that, your favorite creators like myself, at least I hope so, FD Signifier, Jacob Geller, and many others have original content that they only put on Nebula too. There's also Nebula classes as well, where you get to learn from creators like Foreign Man in a Foreign Land about how to make great videos, and so much more. And by signing up for Nebula, you directly help creators like myself, because it does go back to fund things like Identities. So if any of that sounded great to you and you want to support me and Identities directly, please consider signing up at the link below to be able to get Nebula for yourself. And there's all the financial information right there on screen, right here in my chest area. But with all of that said, I cannot wait to bring you Identities in a few months and to share with you all of the cool things we have cooking up with it, as well as I will say, please stick around after this video's credits, because I have a few things that I want to share there as well. But beyond that, enjoy the show. Every Starfield player begins as a miner on their first day working on some godforsaken moon for some shit company. You meet your superior, my gal Lynn, and you're taken into the caves. This is the lowest working class you can be. You're untrained, given crap equipment paid for by the workers from the money the company pays them to need, and safety precautions are non-existent. I mean, what the fuck is this guy even doing?
What do we say, Dusty? You make your cut, you get your cut. No exceptions. Come on, pick it up.
Everyone here has a story for why they ended up working this grunt job in a galaxy filled with prosperity. Except you. The context of your character doesn't matter as to why you're working in this godforsaken company town.
More minerals, more money. And so the cycle repeats itself.
I mean, it literally doesn't, considering you don't see the character creator until after Lynn tells you to touch a random mineral that causes you to experience the most extensive galactic drug trip ever. That's Lynn for you, getting you the good stuff. But you're here on this planet because the story, the game, the universe needs you there. Who you are is immaterial, you're just important. Eventually comes context, and I am born into the world. I create my non-binary Charlize Theron-looking king and give myself the Neon Street Rat perk, which provides me with a vague backstory that I came from Neon, a planet of scum and villainy, allowing me to fill in the gaps that perhaps I ended up here because it was at least a way to escape my upbringing. That's my concept though, as the game does not care about specifics. I could have chosen to be rich, own a mansion, have living parents, and I would still have started in this mine. Who I am doesn't matter. I'm just important. This sense of importance is compounded when some dude just randomly shows up, gets us attacked by pirates, and then sends me off with the drug trip artifact by giving me his ship that I never give back because I'm the main character. I'm sent off to Constellation, a super secret club of super space explorers who want to keep things on the DL by hanging out in the middle of the most trafficked city in the galaxy.
I don't believe in smearing our name everywhere we can. Exploring the universe, charting the unknown, that's what counts.
Despite their secrecy, they are completely chill with some rando MB badass showing up. After a few seconds of mild shock, this group of inquisitive adventurers lose any curiosity in me. I can ask questions about them, their mission, their hopes, their dreams, but they don't even seem passingly interested in who I am.
Are you ready to get to work? Or was there something else?
I am one of them now because I am important, but who I am is not. The only inclination they care about who I am comes in the small surprise that instantaneously everyone genders me properly with they-them pronouns.
I guarantee you this rock breaker here would be halfway to Neon.
But that didn't happen. They're here, with the artifact.
No one ever asked, by the way, they just automatically knew before even asking my name. And I get it, Space Charlize gives off all the NB vibes, but no one makes sure. Hell, even the enemy NPCs that you randomly run into throughout the game will gender you properly, without ever asking. It's honestly refreshing to have my gender respected as I destroy their friends, family, and everything that they stood for. In truth, this is the game's programming reacting to my choice in the character creator, imposing my identity upon the world without question. But in practice, it speaks to the universe of Starfield's lack of curiosity in who I am, in this case through my gender. This extends throughout the game. Starfield features 4 possible romance options, of which Space Cowboy Man with the adorable daughter is clearly the best choice. I mean, come on, how can you not?
There's a whole galaxy full of wonder and things you could never imagine. How can they be satisfied with one tiny sliver of it?
Fucking adorable. But not a single one of them cares what gender you are. They all have no sexual preference other than you. They're a eusexual, regardless of your gender, skills, traits, or sexuality. One might think that this reflects a society in Starfield where gender isn't a big deal anymore. Indeed, you can go into any medical clinic in the galaxy and change your gender as a relatively cheap in-and-out procedure.
We can make you thinner, larger, change your hair, your face, or even your sex. Anything you want.
Hell, the space corporate Risa Pleasure Planet will offer to change your genitals for a few days just for funsies.
They will change their appearance not only when they get here to engage in some fun, but also when they leave to go back to their normal lives.
There are no protests of doctors transing the youth, no one seems sexist or stigmatized for being gay. Gender, it appears, is immaterial. Yet, this cannot be true. The world of Starfield definitively has a binary gender dichotomy. Despite the ability to change your biology entirely available at every hospital, non-binary people don't exist here. I did meet another character played by a non-binary actor.
Well, besides brightening everyone's day with my presence.
But no non-binary characters. In a world where non-binary options are available and sex itself is fluid, people still choose a gender binary unquestioningly. It's not even an ongoing discussion, it just is that way. And this seeming contradiction only exists because of the society today in which Starfield was made. Starfield creates a universe of the future that unquestioningly reflects the context of when it was made, early 2020s America, despite its in-universe foundations necessitating that it should not exist this way. Specifically, it's reflecting an early 2020s America through the eyes of allo cishet people who want a pat on the back for sort of including queer people, but not actually thinking through what that means. In fact, we can see quite clearly that they don't see the seams themselves because, despite the fact Bethesda got praised and defended for its superficial trans inclusion, in reality, it, along with its parent company ZeniMax, held the gender-related healthcare of one of their trans employees hostage in order to coerce her into resigning, after months of mistreating her, including deadnaming her, vilifying her for her health problems, and placing her in potentially dangerous situations as a trans person, such as outing her without her permission, despite the employee repeatedly trying to work with them to avoid all of these outcomes. I'd highly recommend watching the video Lauren Farron, the trans employee in question, made where she detailed everything that happened at Bethesda with receipts. So it's very clear that Bethesda's non-binary pronoun insertion and the ability to change genders within the game is tokenistic symbolism meant to distract from their completely terrible treatment of the actual trans people around them and their complete disinterest in how to take care of and defend trans people in reality. Starfield then becomes a dream of contradictions. By doing so, it asks those who take these gender binaries as a given today to accept the dream without question and never see the seams. And perhaps it was even made by those who do not see the seams themselves. But I saw it. I was unique in my Starfield galaxy in that regard. My very identity as non-binary that I was permitted by the game to exist as was a spear through the heart of this dream, a rupture in it. But it doesn't matter. The who of who I am does not matter. I exist, and the universe bends to me by that virtue alone. I become the universe's protagonist. Because in typical Bethesda fashion, everyone else always has a quest for me or something to say to me as I walk by them, regardless of how much sense it makes. If you appear on the planet Paradiso, for example, the head security officer there, who you've never met, just asked you to be a negotiator with the weird unknown spacecraft that appeared randomly in orbit, giving off strange signals.
Under normal circumstances, we would not enlist outside help in this manner. But this is a matter we can't afford to worry our guests about.
You can also get hired at the leading corporation conglomerate Rewatch, Space Amazon essentially, without a background check. Actually, that one may check out. Hell, even the moments where my chosen street rat background comes into play in the game only makes some options easier or more challenging. It never presents new outcomes or possibilities.
You're trusting me on this one. Huh. Not to cast doubt on myself, but I fully expected to push my persuasion skills to the limit.
The context of my identity does not matter in Starfield. I am neutral and contextless and important anyways. The entire universe is made sterile and bland to make itself for a universal me. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness takes place in a universe at tension with itself, a tension that is revealed through gender. The story takes place on Winter, a planet where the native human inhabitants are all androgynous. While they have bimodal sexes, every member of their species switches between male and female roles during reproductive cycles, with some even being both mother and father within one lifetime. Gender, like in Starfield, seems less important in this world. But unlike Starfield, this society does not reflect our world today. It at first seems entirely alien to it. The Left Hand of Darkness takes place within Le Guin's Hainish cycle. In this universe, human life did not originate on Earth, but existed simultaneously on multiple worlds, including Earth and Winter, thus allowing for human societies wholly removed from the history and context of one another. They're cultures that have never met until now. Our protagonist and anchoring viewpoint into the world of Winter is Genthly I. Genthly I is a diplomat from the Ecumen, a union of planets whose culture, including their gender norms and human biology, mirrors our real-world Western culture today. I is also the stereotypical male hero protagonist of today's society's tales, our society's dreams. He's an explorer, commanding, bold, dominant, the Captain Kirk or Pike of his story. Arriving in Karhide, one of Winter's two nations, I aims to convince the planet's civilization to join the Ecumen. Being from a society heavily rooted in gender, I struggles to understand the culture around him with its fluid sex and lack of gender concepts. Thus, in order to get a grasp on what's going on, he assesses and judges the Kardish people through his lens in order to make sense of it. For one, he relates the different kingdoms within Karhide to the worlds of the Ecumen. I also views technological progress on the planet, which hasn't even developed faster than light travel, as slow by his standards, and he sees their rituals as archaic. I's cultural context is the lens through which he views the Kardish people, leading him to assumptions not based on the society itself. The biggest lens that he places on the Karhide people, most alien to them, is his lens of gender. I views the king of Karhide as a masculine figure of strength, based solely on his position of power alone. At the same time, I also views Estraven, one of the king's chief advisors, as distrustful because I views him as effeminate, less than a man. A revealing bias that I expresses keenly when Estraven reveals that he cannot put in a good word to the king for I, which I takes as an intentional betrayal.
You're selling me out to save your skin, I thought, but there was no point in saying it. Estraven was a courtier, a politician, and I a fool to have trusted him. Even in a bisexual society, the politician is very often something less than an integral man. His inviting me to dinner showed that he thought I would accept his betrayal as easily as he committed it. Clearly, face-saving was more important than honesty.
In truth though, Estraven hasn't betrayed I at all. He's actually been trying to help I because he has developed feelings for him. Estraven did not put in a good word to the king for I because Estraven had lost favor with the king by arguing to help peasants at their nation's borders, in a situation that had nothing to do with I. If Estraven had put in a good word for I, it actually conversely would have made I look bad to the king. But I takes Estraven's betrayal as an outgrowth of his supposed more effeminate nature. But in actuality, I sees Estraven as distrustful because I views Estraven as effeminate, not the other way around. I judges Estraven and the Kardish people on his terms because he does not understand, nor does he care to understand, theirs. And the Kardish people also judge I in return. They are nominally curious about I's skin color, which is darker than theirs, but it doesn't elicit much thought. The king dismisses what I and Ecumen have to offer, their knowledge, their history, and even technology, seeing them as of no value. The king even refers to outer space as nowhere. It is nothing to them. The only thing the people of Winter find interesting about I is that he remains a single sex for his entire life. This they find horrific and disgusting. The king himself calls I a perversion. Despite I being the stereotypical strongman hero of today's narratives, on Winter, he is an outsider, a stigmatized freak. In all of her works, Le Guin's characters explicitly talk about their assumptions. Her stories are about characters confronting different ideas of the universe and forcing them to see in a new way, and asking us to look, as the reader, at what assumptions are implicit in our society today as well. If a straight, heroic man can be seen as a perversion by another society, what does that say about those who view being gay as a perversion in our society today? Left Hand of Darkness takes a similar approach to gender as Starfield, but instead of ignoring it, allows it to be a way in which we understand the world, the context by which we engage with it, and how we judge, misunderstand, malign, and dominate each other. It does what Starfield does not. Ask us to interrogate our world, not accept it unquestioningly. In Starfield, the universe's lack of curiosity about the player is mirrored by the lack of curiosity that we are supposed to have about it. Its universe to explore is best explored through optimized menus. Everything is streamlined to be efficient, unobtrusive, lifeless. Even the missions simplify themselves to not burden the player with personal discovery. In one mission, I arrived at an interview for the mega corporation Ryujin and met my twink king at the reception desk, who gave me a long, convoluted route to where my interview was going to be.
Her office is down the hallway to my left. Take another left at the conference room, follow it around to the right and up a small flight of stairs. Then take a left and keep heading that way until you see her office.
These directions are confusing, and the corporation itself is labyrinthian. I almost got lost in the maze of cubicles, meeting rooms, and servers, allowing me, the player, to begin to feel the oppressive corporate culture's tendrils meant to trap and isolate me. That is until I realized I could just follow my quest marker, or ask my twink god to get me there.
And here we are. Good luck in there. I'll probably see you on your way.
Starfield ensures you experience every story on a railroad as intended, optimizing every single moment. This is not a new criticism of Bethesda RPGs though. Hell, H-Bomber made this same point in his video on Fallout 3, Jesus Christ, 7 years ago.
Remember the forks under the mess hall in the Enclave base? How many players do you think noticed that, or realised why? This is an uncharacteristically cool and funny and human piece of world building, but the game was seemingly designed around making sure you don't see it, because you're too busy looking at this, the one thing telling you where you're supposed to go.
And I'll be frank, I actually understand the criticism, but I always actually appreciated the markers in the game. As a capital G gamer, I actually get anxiety when I don't know where to go or don't have a clear direction. Zelda games often stress me out because I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do, and it's why I like games like Dark Souls more than I like Elden Ring. I know, controversial opinion. I personally like when I'm playing a game to have a clear path and get lost along the way. But that's the problem unique to Starfield in the Bethesda lineup. You always have direction and can't get lost along the way. Traveling between worlds is done in a menu rather than in real time. It's technically possible to go from planet to planet in your ship without using a menu, but it would take hours, and the planets themselves are just hollow balls that you can't land on.
Ooh. It was flat. Pluto confirmed flat. Flat Earth! We just went right through it!
Every landmark in space, like a space station or satellite, is a quick jaunt from where you arrive in on your jumps. In contrast though, on the ground of each planet, locations of interest sporadically dot a landscape between large gaps of nothingness. Gone are the days of Oblivion or Fallout 3 or even Skyrim, where you can spy some extraordinary landmark that piques your interest on your way to another quest. Now, you are only encouraged to go in a straight line. There is no sense of seeing a mountain and being able to climb it if you want to, because why would you want to in Starfield? It's a game about exploring the universe without curiosity about that universe, or building it in the player. Even relationships are efficient. I get a mission notification for simple casual conversations with my companions. Nothing is spontaneous, instead regimented. The romantic relationships are themselves prescribed. Just choose the flirt option enough times and eventually you too can get married. And yes, there is only marriage here.
Another day in paradise with you.
Sex is cold. I can't see myself bumping heels with my cowboy toy. We just lie next to each other and everything fades to black. You know this guy is a freak in bed. He deserves more than a fade-out Bethesda.
With all the fun we had, you managed to get any sleep?
Mass Effect was able to do more in the 2000s than this game is able to do well over a decade later.
Turians certainly don't lack for a sense of direction.
And you don't lack for places to get lost.
Starfield views every interaction as efficient and optimizable, from its story to its universe to its inhabitants. The relationships you form with any of them are not meaningful or enriching. They are just there to funnel you through, all to facilitate a specific experience, a specific story and narrative. They're just lifeless pieces to be used, not treated much differently from the gear you can collect or the sandwiches you can fill a spaceship with. Back on Winter, I is initially incurious about the inhabitants of Winter. He is curious about facts, asking questions about individual banners and ranks within the Karhide Nation. I mean, after all, he is a diplomat on a mission, so he seeks data points for success. But he just is viewing this simple, efficient knowledge of society as only something that he can use for his job. And this is precisely what cuts him off from seeing the personhood of those around him. I dismisses Estraven's concerns out of hand because they are not of value to him.
His ironies and these ins and outs of a border dispute with Orgarain were of no interest to me. I've returned to the matter that lay between us. Trust him or not, I might still get some use out of him. I'm sorry, I said, but it seems a pity that this question for a few farmers may be allowed to spoil the chances of my mission with the king. There's more at stake than a few miles of national boundary.
This idea of use belies how I and his people view the people of Winter. To Ecumen, the people of Winter are only there to be of use to the Ecumen itself. Even the Gethian's biology is considered this way. In one chapter, we read the field notes of an Ecumen scientist studying Gethian biology. The scientist notes how the Gethian reproductive cycle has affected Gethian culture. He links their biology to the fact that they appear to not have a strong sense of dualism, an idea of owner and chattel, or an idea of active or passive. He also supposedly believes that the Gethians do not desire sex as an entertaining activity, only something for reproduction, a function. And as a result, there is no rape, and there is universal parental leave on the planet. But the thing is, all of these viewpoints are presented as factual by the scientist, but in actuality, they're all suppositions.
The fact that everyone between 17 and 35 or so is liable to be, as Nim put it, tied down to childbearing, implies that no one is quite so thoroughly tied down here as women elsewhere are likely to be, psychologically or physically. Burden and privilege are shared out pretty equally. Everyone has the same risk to run or choice to make. Therefore, nobody here is quite so free as a free male anywhere else.
The scientist only understands Gethians through his gendered context, describing them as tied down as a woman or free as a man, underlying his implicit assumption of men being free and women being oppressed in a power imbalance that does not exist on Winter. Because many of his assumptions, such as the fact that Gethians don't desire sex, are actually incorrect, but just not done in the same way that he views sex. There is sexual assault, for example, on the planet, something Le Guin goes into in a story she wrote later on in her life about Winter. Further, as we will get into later, sexual and romantic tension and desire does exist for the people of Winter. So all of the scientist's suppositions are wrong, but he makes them due to these dynamics not appearing in the way that he expects or understands them to. But these biases go beyond his gendered mindset. In the heinous cycle, early human beings were seeded on different worlds by mysterious aliens that the Ecumen call the colonizers. As a result, many of the Ecumen view the purpose of other planets through the colonizer lens. Le Guin is not subtle.
It seems likely that they, the people of Winter, were an experiment. The thought is unpleasant. Human genetic manipulation was certainly practiced by the colonizers. Nothing else explains the Hills of S or the degenerate winged hominins of Rokanan. Will anything else explain the Gethinian sexual psychology? Accident? Possibly natural selection? Hardly. Their ambisexuality has little or no adaptive value.
All of this is an implicit assumption. The scientist centralizes his experience of humanity, the way that he lives, as natural and normal, and thus variations on that theme, the people of Winter, must be degenerate or experiments. It does not cross his mind that he might be the experiment, or that humanity can exist in different forms without reason. He also views nature through value, saying that ambisexuality has no value. But is that true? But as the Ecumen culture sees war, sexual desire, and power hierarchies built on that desire as natural, the scientist considers the Gethian psychology as not valuable and experimental. As a result, the scientist and the Ecumen as a whole is seeing through a colonizer's eyes. How the Gethians can be of use and a resource of value to the Ecumen rather than on their own terms. Le Guin takes assumptions of societies and asks us as the reader to interrogate those assumptions and what they say, not about those being studied or assumed about, but by those who make the assumptions. Starfield, in contrast though, creates a universe where the primary way to interact is through its use for us as the protagonist. So then, what does that assumption tell us about those who made Starfield? Unlike the Hainish cycle, all human life in Starfield began on Earth, which is now a barren desert, rendered uninhabitable due to climate change caused by corporate greed. Too real. Thus, it stands to reason that all the numerous corporations that we see throughout Starfield extend from this specific historical context, our own. Therefore, corporations must be founded on the same exploitation of natural resources and of a working-class labor force created based on societal social stratification. Yet, Starfield presents a world of social neutrality. Most CEOs we see are women, often women of color. Hell yeah, Starfield says #girlboss. The history of old racial or national divides, even cultural histories, appear to have been forgotten when Earth was destroyed, despite this gal having the most Irish fucking accent I've ever heard.
Let me guess.
You're here because you were working a cutter.
Or the majority of people in Starfield having an obviously American accent, which again shows a specific perspective from the writers. And all of this would be understandable given that this game is set hundreds of years in our future, but its contextless nature gives it an eerie quality. Further still, societal stratification doesn't exist even within the context of Starfield's universe, despite our real history of wars and strife. While there are political divisions, this doesn't filter out into individual biases like we see in the real world today. Even the colonized planets themselves feel empty of a real communal identity. There's no real tie to a culture, a sense of past. There is, however, undoubtedly corporate exploitation. For example, we can hear one of our girl bosses discuss her views on the working class of Neon, a fishing planet where many corporations base themselves due to lax laws.
I disagree. I don't see a reason we can't have this discussion. I won't belittle your position with some speech about how Stroud Eklund pays people more than average, or our years of charitable contributions.
My character can bemoan working-class platitudes in casual conversation, to which our girl boss laughs and agrees as if we were on a dinner date.
The invisible hand of the market does not give out its gifts equally. We are literally in a tower, standing above the streets of the city. The metaphor isn't lost on me.
Yet, there doesn't seem to be any sincere interest into how that would function. We don't get to see how the working class is exploited or what stratifications these systems set themselves up upon. Corporations exist, but it's all presented in a neutral state, as are the nations of Starfield. Citizenship can be a factor, such as on New Atlantis, but anyone can become a New Atlantis citizen if they pick themselves up off their bootstraps and work hard as part of a civilian military program. There's no discrimination in who gets to join or politics here.
You'd even be able to buy property right here in New Atlantis. Citizenship unlocks it all, and signing up for the Vanguard is the fastest way to earn it.
Even colonialist histories become meaningless aesthetic. The Constellation Club evokes the British explorer clubs of the 1800s, groups of stoddy British men who would go on expeditions to colonize nations while talking about the white man's burden of civilizing primitive cultures. Constellation's mission to find strange alien artifacts on distant worlds and bring them back to New Atlantis is reminiscent of how British colonialists would steal art and artifacts from cultures not their own, bring them back and put them in a museum in the UK, and refuse to give them back to this day to the people who originally created them, saying that they wouldn't know how to care for their own art.
One can't even think about returning the elegant marbles to Athens until the Greeks start caring for what they already have. I'm sure they'd take great care of the Parthenon sculptures if they were returned, but if you knew a woman was abusing her child, you wouldn't let her adopt another.
1995, in London. That was my first time of seeing an original ancient Benin artwork. Was, yes, at the British Museum to see for the first time these objects. It was a mixture of pride in the achievement of these ancient artists and anger mixed with a sense of loss. Most Nigerians will never see them.
Unlike that, though, you never meet the alien civilization in Starfield whose artifacts you are taking come from. Thus, you have no need to have moral qualms about taking their cultural remains. Starfield then traffics in colonialist imagery in an unquestioning and neutral manner. Militarism, though, is rampant throughout the Starfield universe. Every planet has armed guards wandering around. Even the resort planet has random dudes waving around rifles. Very relaxing, Worf would love it. A generation ship that you encounter that hasn't seen new humans in centuries still has dozens of armed guards on board. What did these people do over the decades? Stand in a hallway their whole lives with guns? Hell, everyone has a gun in Starfield. That dude just pulled a gun presumably out of his swim trunks. I knew that guy was packing heat. Bethesda likely did this so that I, the player, would always face some level of physical violence if I started shooting someone. You know, like rich people. But by doing this, Bethesda presents a universe where guns are ubiquitous and heavily armed militaristic-style police forces using the same weapons as the literal military is seen as an unquestioned natural status quo. Despite those things being very real political issues within our modern day, especially in the United States, and ones that often are disproportionately used against the marginalized and racialized, types of groups that don't seem to exist within Starfield, so that the game can present these very political choices and realities as simply an apolitical game design choice by pretending that these issues wouldn't or don't exist within a universe like Starfield. Just as many capital L liberals ignore that systemic harm is disproportionately violent against racialized folks in the United States, while right-wing conservatives capitalize on this lie of apolitical neutrality of the police in order to protect state and institutionalized power. It's again the universe bending its logic to accommodate me instead of existing on its own terms. And thus, it presents this as a natural state. Everyone is either predator or prey at any moment. And I am expected to play the role of predator. This is just how the world of Starfield presents itself as working, and thus Starfield never envisions options outside of this kill or be killed mindset of a corporate or colonialist lens. For example, in the First Contact mission, the aforementioned Generation ship arrives above Paradiso, a resort world owned by the Paradiso Corporation. The captain of the Generation ship demands that the entire Paradiso company and its people leave the planet because her people had dibs on it centuries ago.
Be firm with them and convince them to leave the planet to us.
You know, finders keepers rules. She, as well as the contrasting Paradiso CEO, are entirely unwilling to share the planet, despite, from what I can tell, the Paradiso company only having like a single hotel on the entire damn thing. Yet, while you can't argue for the captain's desire to own the whole planet, the Paradiso CEO offers you 3 choices. 1, the Generation ship crew can become indentured servants, thereby allowing Paradiso to fire its workers because they now have legal slave labor, which is definitely a fucking choice. Or 2, you, the player, can pay for a grav drive to send the colonialists elsewhere. Or 3, you can murder everyone on the ship.
I'm not suggesting anything, other than it would make our lives so much easier if that ship ceased existing. Make of that what you will.
These are all options that directly benefit Paradiso. The only one that doesn't do so, where you send the colony ship somewhere else, is only possible if you pay tons of money to another separate corporation in order to make it possible for the ship to update its grav drive.
But I've got access to an ancient grav drive that looks like a parts not ship.
So your choices are slavery, genocide a diaspora people, or not our fucking problem but pay us money anyways.
Make of that what you will.
And these are the only options that you can do to officially complete the mission. The only options the game lets you choose are the 3 presented by the CEO and no others. I can't even make my favorite choice. Yeah, I tried killing the entire Paradiso board and all the rich people on the planet. It was great.
What are you doing?
By the way, shout out to the worker who kept cleaning the floors even after I shot his boss in front of him. He gets it. Sometimes you gotta murder the rich, but the floor still has to be clean though.
Hey, hope you're enjoying yourself.
But while the game will let you murder the nameless working class employees willy-nilly, the board and the CEO of Paradiso aren't killable, no matter how hard you try. And believe me, I tried.
Right. On behalf of the Paradiso group, we appreciate your help.
Yet, even if you murder everyone that it is physically possible to kill on the planet, when you return to the Generation ship, the captain doesn't seem to care that you pull off a one-person French Revolution. But even beyond my anarchistic desires, you don't have other options. You can't, for example, set up a way for the individual colonists to choose their own paths and leave the ship, even though some colonists clearly hate their fucking life as part of this community.
I'm the cultivation manager. Fancy words for farmer and fertilizer collector.
I didn't have a choice. Most people don't. You get a job, and that's it. Like, I'm great at what I do, but I would enjoy doing literally anything else. You see exactly the same things. The same people do the same job. It's all the same.
She is literally a cog in a machine, told what role she is supposed to play from birth, and then has to see the same people and fulfill the same function her entire life. She's like an employee at a company, trapped, unable to escape the system or even be able to see beyond it. Nor is the game interested in presenting any other chance for her to break out of that, beyond simply just allowing her to vent her anger at you at some point and saying that she'd rather die than keep going on like this, and then having her keep going on like this. So even if you were to save the colony ship, but still left the captain in charge, it means you'd still be replicating a hierarchical structure that forces people into molds just like a company. Both the ship and the CEOs are awful, and are only presenting subtly different variations of the same mindset because Bethesda can't think of anything else. The only choices you get to make are the CEOs that also accommodate the captain's colonialist desire to own an entire world. And no matter what you choose, despite it not being what she originally asked for or wanted, the captain just seems agreeable to this. Even being forced into slave labor doesn't seem like that big a deal to her, and she gets on her bikini and is ready to just have fun in the sun.
Oh, this is truly wonderful. I'll make an announcement to the crew straight away.
In the Ryujin faction storyline, one of the final missions allows you to choose between two CEOs of Space Amazon. There's Ularu, an extremely competitive-minded woman willing to backstab anyone to get ahead.
Back then, hard decisions were all about screwing people over and white-collar crime. Today, they're more about ensuring success, by any means necessary.
Yeah, this is the kind of girl who would bring a sink as a bad joke to her first day at a company that she acquired. Or there's Masako, the establishment gal who acquires corporations she destabilized so she can appear to be saving the workers in the public's mind, only to downsize the company later.
The truth is, we'll be making evaluations. We'll shed any employees who don't make the cut, slowly but surely.
Despite their superficial differences, both Masako and Ularu are both still willing to sell mind control technology to the highest bidder.
The internal neuroamp is a key component of Ryujin Industries' success for the next 10 years, if not more. Why would we shelve it after we've finally perfected it?
Yeah, they both suck, but one is slightly less harmful? It's a classic Democrat versus Republican's choice, a false dichotomy where there is no real decision being made. We get a lively debate within a spectrum, thus keeping people within that system not questioning because they have the illusion of choice. Your companions lament that either CEO was a terrible choice, but praise you for making a choice.
Amen to that. With a piece of work like Ryujin, I know there isn't a good person to put in charge. I mean, I guess Masako's better than Ularu Chen, but you just know if violence or being just plain evil was the path of least resistance, then Masako would pick it same as Ularu. You're right. I know you're right. Well, the whole damned affair is over. Thank God.
Starfield says, capitalism bad, but also, capitalism just exists and we can't do anything about it. Starfield is the epitome of the saying, it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Hell, they're so bad they've imagined the end of the world and kept the capitalism.
How come no matter how advanced society gets, we still just can't help coming up with new horrors to inflict on ourselves?
Thus, you can't choose to stop this system and do my favorite thing. And like the Paradiso CEO, she literally cannot die. Starfield presents all of this as inevitable and inherent, yet it must create artificial immortality to uphold this fiction. The employees of a Ryujin, however, are entirely killable. No politics on who gets valued as important here. The game even goes so far as to place centrism as a morally good choice. While there is no karma system like Fallout 3 forcing all your choices into good or bad dichotomies, Starfield still presents morality through your companions. In one mission, you meet Musgrove, an employee who toiled away for 7 years for his company and made nothing. Finally, he decided to steal an artifact from the company after being mistreated. And remember, stealing from corporations is not theft, it is reclamation. The player encounters Musgrove when you get a mission from Walter, the CEO of another Neon-based company who just hangs out in Constellation because he just doesn't have anything better to do, and Walter tries to buy the artifact from Musgrove for the lowest price. However, Walter clarifies that he doesn't care about the price. He'll pay whatever, he just finds it fun.
Don't worry about the amount we actually settle on. The Stroud-Eklund Discretionary Fund is just a chip to you and me. Our goal is to get him to accept that chip in exchange for the artifact. Anything goes as long as it's in our hands. This'll be fun. I find matching wits with the Neon Underworld to always be invigorating.
All of this is just a game to him, whereas for Musgrove, it's his entire life as he tries to escape Neon with some money to start anew. But it's okay, the game wants you to fuck over Musgrove, either through intimidation or manipulation, with the mission having you pry into his personal life for leverage. Even worse, later in that same mission, Musgrove gets captured after your meeting by his old company, and the CEO literally shoots him, but faces no consequences for doing so. You can't confront the CEO about this.
It would cement our new partnership if you were to decide on his sentence yourselves.
But the game does allow you to choose what to do with Musgrove. You can kill him, send him to jail for stealing, or let him free. I personally set him free, but all of my companions, every single one, judged me for it.
Thank you. You just won the lottery, pal. Don't waste it.
The game actually wants you to choose to jail Musgrove. This is the way that the system should work. You steal, you get punished. Freeing him is the wrong choice, as is killing him. Yet the CEO can shoot this man and get away with it without any real questioning of that problem within the game. Thus, you can see how the game only presents the ways that corporations see the world. It's all individuals' faults, but the systems themselves have no real culpability in these problems, despite there being very clear individuals at the head of these systems who are culpable.
In fact, at one point, your companions praise the CEO when she says, "I don't give a fuck about anything but my own power, but I try to just nominally care about my employees." Oh, and also notice how she says belong as if her employees are literally owned by her.
If you belong to Stroud-Eklund, we will take care of you. But that is where my sympathies end. I wish I could say I was a better person than that, but I'm not.
It's good that you at least care about your own people. That's more than a lot of people in your shoes.
That's the Neon ultra-competitiveness talking. Don't let her fool you. She moves mountains for others all the time.
Yeah, she's different from other girl bosses. She's one of the good ones. Jesus fucking Christ.
Even beyond all of this, Starfield is defined by Western cultural assumptions around puritanical, functional ideas of gender and sex as well. Sexual intercourse is only allowed when you marry someone. You can't have relationships, like in Baldur's Gate 3, for example, with numerous male, female, or demon partners. You can only be matched, monogamous, and certainly can't talk about sex or flirt in public.
Although I'm flattered that you think of me that way, there's a time and a place for that sort of talk. This is definitely not one of them.
Even Starfield's nightclubs have whatever the fuck these monstrosities are. Yeah, that is sexy.
Come on, dance! Go crazy!
Heaven forbid someone see a fucking chest or cleavage in this world.
I lick my lips and shake my hips. I see you want a piece of this. The way I move is addictive. You're hooked on me like cigarettes.
The game is fundamentally trapped in conservative Western cultural values of sexual norms.
By the power vested in me by the Articles of Constellation, I happily pronounce you life mates. Congratulations!
Starfield's assumptions about the universe reflect a centrist, incurious, and uncritical perspective on today's Western world. It assumes the current social constructs that we exist under must be the only way that we can envision a future. It's empty, hollow, artificially created, and most importantly, it's dull and isolating. I yearn for something to connect to understand Starfield, to feel attached to its world, yet at every turn and in every way, it alienates me. It neutralizes me, my identity, who I am, and how I exist. It's a world that reveres my function as protagonist, but not my value as a unique person, and tells me to view everyone else the same exact way. And so, I take my ship and fly out into the empty darkness of space, yearning for connection that I can't find, in an empty world of fabrications. The Left Hand of Darkness, written in the 1960s, comes directly out of Cold War politics. On Winter, despite its different understandings of gender and sex, Gethian society is not utopian. Karhide and Ogdoran, the planet's two nations, are locked in a Cold War, not of domination, but isolation. The nations, which can broadly represent the United States and Russia at the time of the Cold War, are bordered, and citizens are told to never cross, even splitting local bordered communities that had been once united down the middle. They set up trade blockades and build borders around their society. They set up nations and a sense of national identity to create boundaries within their communities themselves, not just physical borders, and a sense of us versus them. All of this then manufactures a sense of nationalist pride, a pride in oneself and country. At the novel's start, we see a border dispute between the two nations, which Estraven tries to alleviate.
I, Estraden, have been helping some Carndish farmers who live in the valley to move back east across it, thinking the argument might settle itself if the valley were simply left to the Orgata, who have lived there for several thousand years. I got to know some of these farmers. I dislike the thought of their being killed in forays or sent to voluntary farms in Orgorian. Why not obviate the subject of dispute? But that's not a patriotic idea.
And within the Karhide borders, this isolation based on class continues. Karhide is a monarchy, a society with inherent classes and defined roles. Genthly AI watches a parade of jugglers, dignitaries, lords, artisans, merchants, and artists, all at the start of the novel. And all of these different classes and roles serve an authoritarian leader and venerate that authority, even if the individual ruler is changeable, as we see King Argivan ousted at one point in the novel for another king. Later on in the novel, Ai goes to the other nation, Ogdoran, a seeming egalitarian society of collectivists, at least until he discovers the truth. Ogdoran is actually a totalitarian society controlled by an oligarchical ruling class that controls its citizens through military police called the Sarf and drugs that prevent the labor class's reproductive cycles so they do not ever have to stop working, making a robust, endless labor machine. Despite their androgynous society, both nations within Winter still create hierarchies through their own unique, complex biological, social, and environmental factors. Despite all of this, Estraven loves his people, especially the working class of Karhide. But this love often comes at odds with his nation and patriotic duty, which confuses him. When he stands up for these suffering working class border communities, he loses favor with the king. There is a tension then, an alienation between national pride and how the nation wishes to establish its systems, and the people who make up said system. Late in the book, when Ai has come to befriend Estraven, he ruminates on what causes this tension between love of people and a national identity and pride.
I remembered Estraven's comment when I'd asked him if he hated Orgorian. I remembered his voice last night saying it was all mildness. I'd rather be in Karhide, and I wondered, not for the first time, what patriotism is. What the love of country truly consists of, how that yearning loyalty that had shaken my friend's voice arises, and how so real a love can become too often so foolish and vile a bigotry. Where does it go wrong?
Eventually, Ai comes to realize where this bigotry comes from, where hatred for the other comes from, and where the love of people perverts into patriotic nationalism.
No, I don't mean love when I say patriotism. I mean fear. The fear of the other, and its expressions are political, not poetical. Hate, rivalry, aggression, nationalism, a love of the system comes from fear. Fear of the other, seeing one as prey and one as predator, and fearing that, doubling down on what you know, your nation, even if your nation itself hurts the people you love. Thus, nationalism not only isolates you from those who live a different way of life, but from those around you too. It causes you to view anyone who is different, of a different nation, class, sex, gender, as other, and thus needing to be isolated from you.
This moment is key for Ai, where everything clicks for him. He begins to understand how otherization is based on identification with a system that you are from, how you are told to view the world and see it as your own, and make assumptions based on that, which then creates a fear of those who go against what you have been told to assume about the world. Finally, seeing the twisting of Estraven's love turn to nationalism against his own people that he knows that Estraven adores, I can see how he has been doing this same thing to the people of Winter as a person from Ecumen. This becomes the crack in I's wall, tearing down all of his other assumptions. Genthly I could not connect with the people of Winter until this point, as he has built his beliefs and sense of pride from his Ecumen upbringing. He felt that how his society works is how every society should work, and thus he could not connect or empathize with those who see the world differently. It isolated him, and so Genthly I, alone, heads out into the countryside of Winter to see what he can find and connect to. The wilderness of Starfield is vast in scope. You can go to any planet, land anywhere on it, and the game will generate entire landscapes to explore. Yet once you're there, there's nowhere to go. Endless expanses going ever onward, a few randomly generated landmarks, but mostly just terrain. And perhaps this is expected in the vast reaches of space, but even so, it feels artificial. You can find many different types of biomes, but when you see them come together, they're bisected like borders. Two distinct ecologies, never touching, never interacting. Two entirely different systems right next to each other, never connecting. You'll find creatures here, but it's all the same species on every single planet, differentiated by slight tweaks on each world. Variations upon a theme, seated on various worlds like the humans of Le Guin's Hainish cycle, a parallel that then frames Starfield's developers as the colonizers in this story. Even more terrifyingly, you will often find piles of dead animals, mass graves memorialized only by your presence, which is why they existed in the first place, generated only when you landed there. If you investigate, you'll find that these piles are animals the game designated prey when it generated them, and thus species-designated predator hunted them down mercilessly. No matter what planet you land on, even if you go to the entirely different side of the galaxy, this is what you will always find on every world. Predator and prey, distinct biomes, a binary dichotomy. This is the way the universe works in Starfield's view. It's the creator's perspective laid stark naked before you. To make this vast number of planets that their developers didn't have enough time to build themselves, Bethesda used what today we colloquially call artificial intelligence to generate each planet that you land on automatically. But that raises a question: what intelligence made this? And is it truly so artificial? Despite the current cultural zeitgeist fear of artificial intelligence, it is, in fact, not an actual intelligence, nor will it ever gain sentience, at least not in how it's currently built. It's machine learning, a set of algorithms and instructions trained on data curated and selected by humans who decided the system's inputs and outputs, how it will process the data, and how it makes its decisions. Machine learning is limited by the data that it is trained upon, which humans also decide. And it's worth noting that Starfield's use of machine learning is not built on unethical data collection, at least as far as we know, and that, like all tools, machine learning is not inherently bad, though in our corporate capitalist world today, it often can be. But Starfield did not, which is great. Yet, machine learning exists not to communicate, but to execute the algorithms and instructions that it was trained upon. It creates with no intent. However, when humans look at art, at things that are created, we don't see a product. We inherently try to understand what lies beyond in hopes of seeing something meaningful there. We try to see and find patterns even when they don't exist, and thus try to create meaning from them. But to read into what machine learning creates is just to look in a mirror back at those who created its program. And in that mistake, we misperceive what we created, machine learning, as artificial intelligence, as a sentient being, when really all it is a mirror. A mirror that, through our mistake, causes us to fear ourselves. The nature that we see created by machine learning in Starfield presents itself as the natural world, the way the universe is. And Bethesda wants us to assume that these planets function that the way the real world, the ones that we exist in today, are built upon. Or at least be a representative facsimile of it. And yet how they chose to build it reveals how they see the natural world. Because you see, the machine learning created planets of Starfield are not the natural world as they exist. It couldn't be. If an ecosystem existed like this, wholly bisected, it could not function. Real nature is built upon meshing, clashing, and intersecting in chaotic, vibrant, and complex ways that we, from our limited human perspective, cannot understand on our terms. Animals could not simply be categorized as predator and prey, for if they did, the predators would eventually all die, running out of food after their mass murder. It's a non-sustainable ecosystem and a false assumption, a reflection of Bethesda's biases and beliefs about the world reflected back at themselves and given to us. It is a dark world, a disconnected world, a world without meaning, a world of death, and one that cannot exist, at least not for long. It's a manufactured dream. It is the world that Western game company Bethesda presents as natural and asks us not to question. In most mainstream Western cultural stories, nature is but a backdrop, a prop for human characters to use. It is efficient, another thing to take control of, prey for us. Anthropocentrism is the human belief that humans are separate and superior to nature, and that human life has intrinsic value above all other forms. It then logically follows that all other entities are then resources that can be exploited for humanity. And this belief creates an ingrained assumption of hierarchies of which humans, specifically Western European humans, and mostly men, are on top. Many trace the root of this idea to the Christian Old Testament and Genesis, where the Christian God instructed humans to subdue nature and control it, with the Christian God's highest creation, Adam, deciding the names for animals in the Garden of Eden instead of the animals getting to name themselves. Thus, the creator, the colonizer, tells its human creation that everything is but a distortion of itself, and are thus resources to be used by those higher on the chain of command. You do not need to understand those below you, for they are just reflections of you and can and should only be understood by your perspective alone. Western culture has come to tell that story because that is how we understand nature. Our stories, our myths tell, as Joseph Campbell put it, the hero's journey. A protagonist going out into the unnatural world and coming back with some knowledge and value to create a new status quo for the non-heroes to benefit from. Everything, including the universe itself, bends to accommodate the hero. Who the hero is, the context, his culture, and his history does not matter. He just is important. He is a monomyth. The same ending and beginning, never telling a new story because we repeat the story over and over and over again in a cycle.
Women in this story are just a variation of man, and thus less than, but also the original sin, the thing that tempts man away from his true place in the Garden of Eden. In the story of Eden, gender and nature are seen as intrinsically linked in terms of how we think about ingrained hierarchies, how man has control over nature and over women because women betrayed him and are just a variation of him. And this system is all set in place by a higher authority, by a god, a creator, by the colonizers, by the boss, by a CEO. We are all ultimately prey for someone above us, and our job is to try to become the predator. Even when we try to place new people within this narrative, we still create it as predator and prey, Take the recent Barbie movie, for example, which put a woman at the center of the hero's journey. But what happens at the end of that movie? Does she break society and make a more egalitarian world? No, she just recreates a matriarchy that treats men slightly better.
But maybe a lower circuit court judgeship.
We accept, as long as we can wear robes.
Well, the Kens have to start somewhere, and one day the Kens will have as much power and influence in Barbie Land as women have in the real world.
She's a kinder god, but still a predator. So even when we tell women's stories, we still place it into this idea of predator or prey. Our mainstream stories cannot break this endless cycle.
This is the story that Starfield tells us and presents as the only story. We cannot think beyond predator and prey. The main questline of Starfield is just the hero's journey that loops back upon itself repeatedly. You collect alien artifacts to give yourself powers, make yourself stronger than all the rest. We never meet the aliens who created the artifacts, we never genuinely meet something outside the context of our history. However, we do meet the Starborn, who initially seem alien, but as my cowboy lover points out, they appear oddly reflective of ourselves.
Their ships were incredible, but they still felt like ships. They had engines, weapons, I think I even made out a grav drive. If they were really alien, I would just expect it to be more alien, you know?
Spoilers, but it turns out the Starborn are humans from other universes altered by these artifacts, and they believe humanity does not deserve them and cannot handle these powers. These artifacts from the Creator are what give them the ability to make these choices for all others lower on the power hierarchy for them. Thus, the Starborn travel throughout the different universes attempting to prevent others from getting the artifacts. They are the predator, the ruling class, and everyone else below them is the prey, the things to be used and told what to do.
In the game, you meet two Starborn, the Hunter and the Emissary. The Hunter, a man who murders his way across the universes to continually gain the artifacts, is revealed to be a man who is a person of peace in your universe, revealing in this game's logic that even men of peace, prey, can become predators.
What do you mean? What ain't true mean any kind of way of things how
The Hunter believes in kill or be killed purely. He is like Karhide in The Left-Handed Darkness, a dominating society with one ruler that is venerated for his power.
There are no rules. Whoever gets all the pieces wins. And I've won. Over and over. I don't kill for the unity. I find the easiest pathway to it.
The Emissary is a version of one of your companions from your universe who dies in the game due to the Hunter, prey for the Hunter, who in another universe became the Emissary Starborn, a predator. The Emissary creates a ruling body of Starborn, of great men and women, to decide who gets to use the artifacts in each universe. Essentially an oligarchy that likes to pretend it's a collective for those it controls, like Ogdorin. She allows you to pick yourself up off your bootstraps to join them through hard work.
You've witnessed the power granted by the temples, the anarchy that can be unleashed. Someone has to decide who should get them.
Here it comes. The Emissary tells you only the worthy should enter heaven.
But in the end, both the Emissary and the Hunter are just telling the same story, something that the fascist Hunter correctly points out.
I have debated morality for near infinity, and all I have found are groups of people enforcing their will on others. Rules and laws spoken as principles, but backed by arms and violence.
In the end of the game, you can choose to become a Starborn yourself or not, to stay prey or become a predator.
You can't, for example, choose to give the Starborn powers to all of humanity in your universe. In fact, the artifacts themselves only allow one person per universe to go through it, meaning that to use the artifacts you have to inherently become the ultimate leader, the ultimate predator, in order to use its power. And everything else around it is about choosing how you wish to become the predator or stay the prey, and how you wish to justify your choice to yourself in this story.
And the game wants you to become a predator because if you do, you can travel to other universes, where you can start the game again. Despite being in a whole new galaxy, the same story repeats. There's nothing new here, every galaxy is exactly the same as the last one, with a few tweaks and changes here, but ultimately just telling the same tale. a hero starting a new status quo.
Excuse me, this is a private... Wait. There's something familiar about you.
This time with more power, more knowledge, but telling the same story. You save or kill. You spare or let live. You are a god. You are the one who decides. You do not see anyone as your equal because they aren't.
At the end of the main quest, you reach the Unity, the place where you can cross between universes, which speaks to you and makes illusions about seeing beyond a limited perspective, how we are all connected.
I am as much you as you are a part of everything. All points connect to here. When a star is born or dies, its existence beats through the heart of this place.
Yet the Unity, and thereby the universe, the final statement of Starfield, is just presenting you visually mirrored back at yourself, just as Starfield is mirroring its own lack of curiosity about the universe. It's making vain attempts to say that this is saying something grand beyond itself, yet it cannot, it just reflects you. In fact, it even says as you enter the Unity and go to another universe, you change the universe yourself. You become the elixir that changes the entire status quo.
You must give the universe one last thing. Yourself. That intangible part of you. That's something that makes you unique amongst the infinite will explode like a supernova. A part of you will fuse with the essence of this universe, while another part leaves it behind forever.
You become an incredible, important impression upon the entire universe, you specifically. Even though the you has never mattered in the first place in this universe, who you are means nothing to Starfield. Just that you are important to the literal changing of the galaxy. Yet what are you changing it for? How are you going to change it? Because you aren't anything to this game. You're just an endless reflection back at yourself. You are important because you're the protagonist, but anybody could be the protagonist.
I have enjoyed speaking to you once again. All of you. Every version that is here in the Unity right now.
You are important only because you are a good cog in the machine, by your very unimportance, never escaping the story. This attempt to subvert and yet uphold the hero's journey is something our culture is just stuck on right now. Star Wars Ahsoka, the Barbie movie, Starfield, and many others have all had the exact same ending of meeting a version of yourself and having to choose between life and death.
You understand that humans only have one ending. Ideas live forever. Humans not so much.
Of meeting a version of yourself in some ethereal nether space that's supposed to represent the entire universe, the collective unconscious, and having to choose between life or death, become predator or prey.
Live? Or die?
And this is the same story that RPG-style video games have been doing over and over and over again. I mean, look at Mass Effect 3. Control, destroy, synthesis. It's the same damn choice as in Starfield. Our movies and TV shows have protagonists make one of these three choices, be it control like Luke Skywalker, destroy like Anakin, or synthesis like Ahsoka. But video games reveal the artifice of this choice, how we don't really have any agency in making it. We are just presented with the same three over and over and over again. We can't think beyond the confines of this predator and prey story. Everyone is feeling this cycle that we are stuck in it right now, and yet we don't know how to escape it. It's an Ouroboros eating its own tail, a circle back upon itself that even Starfield's own logo references. This belief in a universal human experience sans the context of a person's specific life is ultimately a straightforward mechanism of capital. One might think that there are some ways that capital will address issues of racism, but usually it comes down to these sort of stereotypical individual ideas of like, oh, this person went to a grocery store and got called a mean name, or we can fix racism by tokenistic inclusion like a girl boss in a CEO position. But that's as far as capitalism will acknowledge anything, because it's trying to centralize the idea that racism is an individual issue. Certain people are just bad and they're immoral and we can beat them. It's not the system's fault that these prejudices exist, and it tries to downplay the idea that a person's entire situation in the world is made up of a ton of different decisions that are completely outside of their control, how even the way they look will affect how they live, how they're treated, and what they get to have. This is the propagation of a narrative that suggests neutrality of a human experience that is essentially essentially natural, the way that the world works, and that's how it's always been. Not because that's how the systems of capital make them work. It's the telling of this endless cyclical narrative that there is a central protagonist in the story of capitalism, that it's unimportant what their background is in terms of class, gender, race, or even their interests, but that anyone can pick themselves up off their bootstraps and follow the path and work hard and become the winner of capitalism. It's this way of saying that there is a path and a good person follows the straight and narrow path to success, and that there are all these distractions, villains along the way that are going to try to pull you off and make you think about gender and race, make you think of yourself and your context, that these are manipulators trying to push you off the path to your deserved success. And if you fail, it's because you believed these lies, these distractions, rather than believing in a system that was never actually built to let someone like you succeed in that story in the first place. Yet Starfield tells this story endlessly, this propaganda of capitalism, this endless circular story of a protagonist who it doesn't matter who they are, completely uncritically. Hell, even one of the first lines of the game is an oblique reference to this capitalist endless Ouroboros.
More minerals, more money, and so the cycle repeats itself.
This is the defining worldview of Starfield. From its machine learning planets to its final universe-hopping story, it's the same tale told over and over and over again. Kill or be killed. Control or be controlled. This is the way the world will always be, can only be. No matter how much we have to lie to make that story seem true.
Although you leave this universe behind, a new universe awaits you. Who will you be in this one? What choices will you make?
This story creates a world, a dream, that makes a mirror back at ourselves and shows us how we view the world, not what the world actually is. We see a world of predator and prey because we create stories that things that are truly alien to us are perversions, less than, not real people. Prey. We see ourselves as predators, and so we fear becoming prey when we look in the mirror because we see something looking at us with a predator's gaze. These stories tell us that everything is kill or be killed because that's the way we see the world. Thus, we attack what we see as other because we fear that they will do that to us, because it is what we would do to them. It's the only story that we can tell. Ursula K. Le Guin grew up the child of an anthropologist and a writer. Her whole life was studying cultures different from the one that she was born into, attempting to understand their perspective on their terms rather than on hers. Until one day, this caused her to ask this question of nature. How do we give voice to nature? Can you give voice to a perspective that you cannot ever hold? Human understanding limits us. Can we find context for it?
It sometimes seems that that story is approaching its end. Lest there be no more telling of stories at all, some of us out here in the wild oats amid the alien corn think we'd better start telling another kind, which maybe people can go on with when the old one's finished. Maybe. The trouble is, we've all let ourselves become part of the killer story, and so we may get finished along with it. Hence, it is with a certain feeling of urgency that I seek the nature, subject, words of the other story, the untold one, the life story.
Joseph Campbell argued that the monomyth was the stories that we had told all throughout every human culture, but in truth, he erased so much history and stories of other civilizations in order to press it all into his mold. Like the stories of different genders, of women, of non-binary people. He erased the unique history of Jewish people and indigenous American tribes of being one with nature.
Campbell, in other words, argues that the power of myth comes from its grounding in the psyche of the individual rather than in the reality of communal life. Myth, for Campbell, is universal rather than particular. The differences between the myths of various cultures matter less than the similarities that he can find in or project onto them. The implications of this idea are very serious. Campbell's tendency to universalize human experience and erase differences prevent him from engaging seriously with historical tragedies such as the Holocaust as touchstones of reality. That is, Campbell's theories led him to psychologize historical tragedies, lumping them all together essentially as identical beats in the endlessly recurring, never fundamentally changing monomyth.
In truth, the hero's journey, the monomyth, is not the only story, but the only story that we, in our culture today, tell ourselves. We do not see the world from another perspective. We just want a mirror reflecting back at ourselves, believing that this is the only story that we can tell. Yet we don't realize that we could tell another story. That it need not be predator and prey. We don't need to fear the other, because the other does not necessarily see us as prey. Le Guin understood this because she saw new stories in nature, in the cultures that she encountered. She sought the other, not her own reflection. She sought stories that she had not been told, stories beyond the killer and the killed.
Philosopher Donna Haraway described her concept of cyborg feminism as one which seeks for women and all humans to become cyborgs, a melding of human and machine. But the machine is not the artificial kind of machine that we think of it today, but the machine is what we see as other by humanity, whether it be technology or something like nature, for example. Nature is the machine within the cyborg, something that we see as other, but is actually an inherent part of ourselves. By seeing ourselves, our very bodies, as cyborgs, as a melding of what we think of as humanity and the other, as a balance and a relationship, as a sharing of a space, we can reject the idea of dualism, of binary dichotomies, of predator and prey stories.
There are several consequences to taking seriously the imagery of cyborgs. Our bodies, ourselves. Bodies are maps of power and identity. Cyborgs are no exception. A cyborg body is not innocent. It was not born in the Garden of Eden. It does not seek unitary identity and so generate antagonistic dualism without end or until the world ends. It takes irony for granted. One is too few, and two is only one possibility. Intense pleasure in skill, machine skill, ceases to be a sin, but an aspect of embodiment. The machine is not an it to be animated, worshipped, and dominated. The machine is us, our processes, an aspect of our embodiment. We can be responsible for machines. They do not dominate or threaten us. We are responsible for boundaries. We are they.
Coincidentally, there is also an AI in The Left Hand of Darkness as well. Genthly I, or Genthly AI, our protagonist. But his name, unlike artificial intelligence, actually reveals the truth. It is the word I, or I. A single perspective. A sole view, isolated from others. Throughout the bulk of The Left Hand of Darkness, I can only see his self and his own perspective. He had been unable to connect to Winter, the Gethians, or even his friend Estraven. But when he heads out into the wilderness of Winter, he meets the farmers, the ordinary people, and he begins to hear the stories that the Gethians tell each other, stories that cross the borders of their two nations because they are something not confined by those borders. He hears the folklore story of sworn enemies who conceive a child, a bridge once thought impossible. And later, when I flees the nation of Ogdoran, he is rescued by Estraven. And finally, in the wilderness, removed from both nations, he chooses to connect with Estraven in a way that he never thought possible. I chooses to mind connect with Estraven. Mind connecting being I's ability to link telepathically that he had feared to use until this point because it was against the laws of his culture, a boundary meant to isolate him. But finally, in nature, removed from the nations and systems that define and confine, I can see Estraven fully from his own perspective, and he falls in love.
And I saw then again, and for good, what I'd always been afraid to see and had pretended not to see in him, that he was a woman as well as a man. Any need to explain the sources of that fear vanished with the fear. What was left was, at last, acceptance of him as he was. Until then, I had rejected him, refused him his own reality. He had been quite right to say that he, the only person on Gethin who trusted me, was the only Gethinian I distrusted, for he was the only one who had entirely accepted me as a human being, who had liked me personally and given me entire personal loyalty, and who therefore demanded of me an equal degree of recognition, of acceptance. I had not been willing to give it. I had been afraid to give it. I had not wanted to give my trust, my friendship to a man who was a woman who was a man.
I feared to see Estraven, because to do so would be to recognize something different from himself, something alien to him, as equal, as equally worthy of life. He had to look out at the other and stare into it and fully see it as a full, unique being. And it's by no means a coincidence that in Le Guin's story, the manly, gently I has to learn to connect with someone that is named Estraven, which sounds an awful lot like estrogen. I has to not see estrogen, a hormone associated with women, as not other but a part of himself. This fear of womanhood is why our society today often sees anyone who isn't a true man, quote unquote, as becoming a woman, as becoming prey. How trans women, for example, are seen as evil because we are dark forces turning men into women. Something less than, turning predators into that prey. Or how trans men, those who were already seen as less than human from how they were born, as prey to be used, seeking to become fully actualized as men. And it's why the very existence of non-binary people is a threat, because we break the idea of there just being predator and prey. We show that there doesn't have to be a binary, but we can be whoever we wish to be. And it's why people see the mere existence and acceptance of non-binary people as a break in that story, something that must be viewed as violent against them, because our existence is a violence against how they wish to see the world. As control or be controlled, because non-binary people seek not to control or to be controlled. We just seek to be ourselves. And this simple recognition of the other causes everything else to crumble.
Light is the left hand of darkness, and darkness the right hand of light. Two are one, life and death, lying together like lovers in Kemmer, like hands joined together, like the end and the way.
To tell Left Hand of Darkness, Le Guin pulled from the Taoist doctrine that there is balance in difference, in yin and yang. Others are part of each other, intertwined, not distinctive, separate things. It was also a distinctly non-Western European cultural perspective, but one that she found a connection to despite not having grown up in it. And from this seed of understanding nature is different and yet connected to us, grew the roots of all her political learnings. She fought against nationalism, recognizing that systems that create hierarchies inherently develop a fear of the other to pervert the love of others into love of self. In Left Hand of Darkness, she showed that gender and sex were always ways that we tried to establish that very boundary.
We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings.
She also understood that capitalism, too, was a game of denying connection, of building itself up on competition between each other, of needing to be one above the other always.
The more I read in anarchism, the more I realized that it was the only major political theory that hadn't had a utopia written about it. And I thought, well, that would be fun. That would be cool.
A system that cannot exist because it is built on the lie that you need to endlessly consume and destroy and take from all around you, when there is only a limited amount for us to use. All of it was a myth, a story that we told, and Le Guin recognized that.
Capitalism's grow or die imperative stands radically at odds with ecology's imperative of interdependence and limit. The two imperatives can no longer coexist with each other, nor can any society founded on the myth that they can be reconciled hope to survive. Either we will establish an ecological society, or society will go under for everyone, irrespective of his or her status.
Le Guin realized that the truest story is not one of us requiring rebirth, but of us seeking regeneration. Yet, despite being able to understand all of this, Le Guin knew that she was also confined and defined by her own context, limited by her perspective, by assumptions that she didn't even know that she had.
My mother's book opened many people's eyes, including my own, to the appalling history of the white conquest of California. Some people are quick to see injustice and cruelty, but I was slow to see it. I had to put the pieces together myself, and it took a long time. It's kind of hard to admit that your people did something awful. When I absorb something like that, what I do with it, the way I handle it, is probably to put it into a novel.
Science fiction is often described and even defined as extrapolative. The science fiction writer is supposed to take a trend or phenomenon of the here and now, purify and intensify it for dramatic effect, and extend it into the future. A prediction is made. This may explain why many people who do not read science fiction describe it as escapist. But in truth, science fiction is not predictive, it's descriptive. Predictions are uttered by prophets, free of charge, by clairvoyants, who usually charge a fee and are therefore more honored in their day than prophets, and by futurologists, salaried. It is not the business of novelists. A novelist's business is lying. Fiction writers, at least in their braver moments, do desire the truth, to know it, speak it, swerve it. But they go about it in peculiar and devious ways with a great deal of emotion, and then when they're done writing down this pack of lies, they say, "There, that's the truth. The only truth I can understand or express is logically defined, a lie. Distrust everything I say. I am telling the truth."
Le Guin understood that her fiction writing was describing the context that she existed within. It was lies told to reveal her truth, her perspective to the world. And as such, she was limited by it. The Left Hand of Darkness features androgynous aliens, but Le Guin only ever used the pronouns he and him to describe them. Le Guin grew up in a patriarchal society that placed men as the norm, and as a result, at the time that she wrote The Left Hand of Darkness, she could only think of masculine pronouns to use for her androgynous species. Further, Estraven and I speak of love, but deny themselves the ability to touch, denying their sexual tension.
For it seemed to me, and I think to him, that from that sexual tension between us, admitted now and understood but not assuaged, that the great and sudden assurance of friendship between us rose. For us to meet sexually would be for us to meet once more as aliens. We had touched in the way only we could touch. We left it at that. I do not know if we were right.
Le Guin could not, at the time that she wrote the book, imagine two masculine-defined characters as having sex. A hint of the homophobia that she had not yet unpacked because it was an assumption she had not confronted when she wrote the book. But, to Le Guin's credit, she worked her whole life to deconstruct her Western cultural perspectives of the world, to find who she was beneath all of that. She knew that she had to fight these assumptions within herself and, by doing so through her writing, in the society around her and those who connected with her work.
Do I think that The Left Hand of Darkness that Ursula would write now would be The Left Hand of Darkness that I read in 1971? No, obviously not. She has changed, and the world has changed.
At first, I felt a little bit defensive, but as I thought about it, I began to see my critics were right. I was coming up against how I could write about gender equality. Just because you've written a book about something doesn't mean you're done thinking about it. There's always room to keep expanding your ideas, keep learning. My job is not to arrive at a final answer and just deliver it. I see my job as holding doors open or opening windows, but who comes in and out the doors? What you see out the window? How do I know?
She fought when the protagonist of her Earthsea novels, Ged, was depicted as a white man on book covers because all fantasy heroes were assumed to be white at the time. She also fought capitalism, anthropocentrism, patriarchy, white supremacy, and more, yet sometimes also upholding those very things as well. She fought to break the confines of her perspective, even as she knew she was also forever tied to it.
Jessie's people were among those people who you don't tell a stranger your name. My father said, "What would you like us to call you?" And Jessie means man, a male person. We don't know Jessie. We'll never know.
She also understood our failure to see others was leading us to death, seeing ourselves as killers who only create an ecology of death. Le Guin tried to push beyond her limitations, to question her surroundings in every word that she wrote, even as she failed to escape them entirely. Starfield, by contrast, creates a universe that does not challenge the culture it was created in. Recreating it in a way that states what is constructed is natural. It does not create new context. Instead, it tries to be a space game that means nothing, explores nothing, collapses into the void of its own mirror. Identity is treated as non-existent, and other people are seen as efficient objects for use only. There is no curiosity, as it hides the darker truths of the labor, exploitation, capital, and colonialization systems it shamelessly rips off. Its universe is one of predator and prey, as if the natural world was just that simple. It tries to present the neoliberal lie that everything can be apolitical, except those it deems othered by society. It is sad in its lonely, spineless inability to say anything meaningful at all. Starfield speaks nothing, and somehow says everything. Despite its vast quantity, it is minuscule. It creates a mirror, a constant wheel that rotates back on itself. It is a lie that identity, who you are, does not matter, only the system does. You are a cog for that system so long as you work to fit within the machine, you are allowed. And to be the best cog, you must be a predator who consumes and kills those who are different, who do not fit the machine. Mr. Babyface said that he wanted escapism into a world that did not question his beliefs.
We can't see past our own fucking reflection! That's the level of our narcissism here at Bethesda Western Game Company!
Sadly, simple pronouns were what threw him out, the only time that Starfield did the barest challenge to his worldview. Because in truth, Starfield is the perfect game for him.
There have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but no societies that did not tell stories.
Why do we tell stories of outer space? What compels us to look into the black void from our limited perspective on this small ball of Earth? Why are we so fascinated with the dream of something like the space game? Space is filled with our stories. From Elon Musk's corporatized space to science fiction writers' hopeful futures to those old human civilizations making stories out of the stars in the sky. When humans have looked up into the night, we have tried to find meaning in the void by impressing our own stories onto it. The tales of our gods, our corporations, our visions of how the world is. And it becomes a mirror, reflecting darkly back at us through the void, something that we mistook for other. Space is filled with our fear, too. We fear that maybe what sees us will hate us because they don't understand us. And so we fear them for being different. We preemptively fear what we cannot understand for the horror, the crushing, sad fear that no one is out there who can understand us. For in truth, we cannot understand ourselves when we look in the mirror, because our stories are lies that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel comfortable. And we see nature as a truly alien thing that we desire to control so that it does not control and define us. And thus, we fulfill our own prophecy. What we fear is our reflection. Overcoming that fear is the true struggle to find context beyond ourselves, to fulfill our hopes. Because if we do, we may find more to connect with than our stories could ever imagine. Even in the furthest reaches of the galaxy, invisible tendrils of gravity reach. Every object affects another, even if we do not see it or know it or feel it. We are all tied together. And maybe, if we pull out far enough, we will see that we are just individual instruments playing the same melody. The void is not empty. It is full of song. And we perhaps will understand ourselves better if we choose to hear that whole song, not just our part. At night in summers when I was a child, I would lie in this big field of the camp that I worked at and look out at the colors of the night sky. And I wondered if someone out there saw me in that moment. Because in truth, I never felt more alone and wanted to be seen. I didn't realize then, but that desire to be seen was hope. I hoped to be seen because back then, I couldn't see myself. Someone did see me in my reflection. Found me under that night sky. Because I dreamed of someone more than I was. I dreamed of who I could be. Who I would be. And that took courage, and love, and dreams. Our dreams of space are just our desire to form a relationship with the other. We wish that other would look back at us, even if only glimpsed briefly through our feeble attempts to connect, hoping that for one moment our consciousness will share equal space and understanding with something we never touched before. The stars are just an emptiness that we press our wish to find something new to connect with upon. The stars are not empty. They are filled with our hope, our future. And so, we dream away.
It's like the whole world's over me, overwhelmed till I fall asleep. I may be young, but feeling old. Another day to drain my soul. All the answers are to seek. I struggle to be alone. Oh no, no, why would I go tell a soul? I'm not going down, there's a long way to hit the ground. If I fall, will I even make a sound? If I hit the place you already own. I struggle to be alone. Oh no, no, why would I go tell a soul? I'm not going down, there's a long way to hit the ground. If I fall, will I even make a sound? If I hit
You don't speak of dreams as unreal. They exist. They leave a mark behind them. Hope is a slighter, tougher thing even than trust. In a good season, one trusts life. In a bad season, one only hopes. But they are of the same essence. They are the mind's indispensable relationship with other minds, with the world, and with time. Without trust, a man lives, but not a human life. Without hope, he dies. When there is no relationship, where hands do not touch, emotion atrophies in void, and intelligence goes sterile and obsessed. Between men, the only link left is that of owner to slave or murderer to victim. It is above all by the imagination that we achieve perception and compassion and hope.
Alrighty, interwebs, I hope you enjoyed this video. This one was kind of a fun one for me because, you know, I started playing Starfield because I am a big Bethesda fan, even though I have many critiques of their games, and I just found myself thinking a lot about the game and how we think about space, and because I was thinking about Identities, which is my movie that I filmed, and a lot of that movie does have to do with Ursula K. Le Guin's work in a couple subtle ways, I was just thinking about all of those things together, and I'm like, I think this would be a really cool conversation to put these two works, Ursula K. Le Guin and Starfield, up against each other to see what we can discuss and find. So I know it's kind of a weird video to do, but I think it would be kind of an interesting one. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and please let me know in the comments below. That having been said, I do have to sadly share a frustration that I had making this video, because while I've been having so much joy and fun making my film Identities lately, this video was honestly incredibly frustrating, because the original plan for this video was for it to release basically a week before it actually did, and it would be sort of a video that I would have out right after I finished Identities so that I could actually take a breather and relax a little bit since production was so hectic. And as a part of that, I actually hired one of my regular editors to edit it for me. And I'm not going to say their name because I'm not here to call anyone out, but this editor basically left high and dry, took my money that I paid them to edit the video, and then only turned in half of the work done, and then refused to respond to any calls, texts, or DMs that I sent them. So I was out all my money and didn't have a completed video on time, so that meant immediately after finishing Identities, I had to come home and be editing this for the next few days. So I have not had a ton of rest, and probably no matter what, I am going to lose money on this video because I paid someone to do it, and then they cut out on me, and then I had to waste time on doing it myself and pay a couple other people to do some visual effects stuff. And so that is incredibly frustrating. And then on top of that, you know, filming a movie costs a lot of money, and while Nebula has funded a lot of it, there are also a lot of, you know, extraneous things like U-Hauls and stuff like that that I had to pay for myself. So the reason that I'm bringing this all to you is not to vent my frustrations, but just to ask that if you like my videos, do you like my work, like the things that I do, please do consider supporting me over on Patreon. It's been kind of a tightening the belt sort of situation a little bit in the past few months, especially when it comes to like being able to hire other people, and hopefully more reliable people at this point, like editors and things things like that. I haven't been able to do that as much. So if you do like my work and you do want to get yourself perks like your name in videos and things like that, please, please, please consider supporting me over on Patreon.
And there's some bonus stuff over on Patreon as well, including an entire video that I did on Good Omens Season 2 and why that season was so incredibly wonderfully queer and also broke my heart at the same time. As well as some really cool exclusive interviews I've been doing with fellow creators here in the YouTube space about critical issues relating to LGBTQ rights and also many issues that came up in this Starfield video as well.
But no pressure. If you can't do that, that's totally great. I hope you at least enjoy the videos and are having a lot of fun, and I am just excited to make things for you. That's the whole point of this, is that I want to share my joy and share creative things with you, like identities that'll be coming very, very soon. So be on the lookout. I'll probably be talking more about identities and all the secrets and fun stuff with that starting early next year when we get a little bit further into post-production, but believe me, we have some very fun things for you, so be on the lookout for that. Beyond all of that, I have a podcast, all the other stuff that y'all know. I'm on the social medias and things like that. But beyond all of that, I hope you all are just taking care of yourselves, and as always, my friends, live long and prosper. Thank you so much, patrons. I could not do this without you. You literally make my entire life possible, so thank you so much for that. And I want to give an extra special thank you to Carrie Ellen Foss, Joel Herman Holt, Nils Osborne Oldensholm, Arcton Arkleser, Lily Gray, Heather Long, Barbie Ann Rounds, Eltan Tivy, Sarah Montgomery, Jack McAllen, Stephen Kleinard, Hannah Friedrich, Courtney Ray Kelly, Jem Shin, Michael Wolnitz, Christian Hertz, Iron, Dark Archon, Alex Miller, Randy Thompson, Matt Chung, Chloe Dollar, Chris Showers, Baba Ruski, Super Desi, Samuel Howard, Brits Creek, Smokey Heather Sylvia, Nissan Mayer, Christine S., Tara Rose, Angela Hendricks, Vincent Ellington, Todd Verling, Lily Blanley, Joseph Dewey, Meadow Whisper, Alicia Stice, Joelle Gilly, Felicia Tost, Marshall Nye, Sammy Joe Retro, James Krivda, Rose Connolly, Zane Schuchler, Dominic Noble, Onwe Eos, Jennifer Fuss, Weirdy Beardy, Ruth, Kaylee Lang, Sunk Corgi, Sean McKenzie, Nathan Fraughton, Jolene Cassidy, Sonia Nero-Perdo, Farangato, Quattro, Shield Maiden 4444, Sasha M, Melody Ann, Winters Good, Teresa, Rain Concorgan, Ryan Hunter, Lev Goodwin, Scott Russell, John Weatherby, Craig and David, Kayla Arula, Leah Boyd, Damian Rice, The Mighty Jinjo Joe, W. Randy Edie, Teague Wilson, Melinda Walters, Jane Persuades, LK, Stephen Richardson, Kevin Frotag, Sean Piper, Goat Stefansson, Sean Sullivan, Flyan Katie, Beatrix Poovers, Matthew Craiglow, Epsilon is greater than, David Dema Flynn, Mark H. Williams, author, William Stewart, Patricia Cromston, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, Adam Smasher, Grumpy Dragon 75, Kay Liss, Sarah Boston, Blueberry Hill, Casual Observer, Laura Demereau, Emma Ramirez, Jeffrey Day Thompson, Sky Skinner, Roy Negby, Sarah Lamoureux, Katie K, Jason Knott, Jess Johnson, Rosalind Bennett, Verdicts High, Kurt Mullen, Jordan Lesserow, Blue, Bob's Saget, The Tipsy Changelings, Valerie Blackbird, Luna, Troy Stull, Joanne the Wretched Witch, Zophel, Celestial Dawn, Hope Jace Tuliana, Tori Pertz, Carolyn Clark, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Crit Fax, Devin Camerlocker, Carrie On, Lou Toston, Michael Weber, Callum McLeod of Clan McLeod, It's a Bug, Not a Feature, and Abigail Marie. Thank you to all of you. I send you all the love. Mwah, and live long and prosper, you beautiful people.